Hi Year 7, hi Year 8. This is another session of the challenge, but this is challenge number 2. I've already put on a video for spring rolls, but I thought I'd show you another product so that you could see how to maybe increase the level of challenge and the level of skill and complexity to it. So I'm going to make something called a short crust pastry. Now, short crust pastries are used for sweet and savoury products, and it's a really good skill to learn. Yes, you can buy shop bought pastries, but making your own is quite quick and it does taste really good. I'm making a roasted vegetable tart with sort of goat's cheese on the top. Probably not necessarily the kind of ingredients you like at this point, but you can adapt and change the ingredients so that you enjoy them. You can do lots of different fillings. The whole challenge is all about using colourful vegetables. So soups even would be good, stir fries. But to make the pastry, I have a flan tin. This is called a fluted flan tin because the edge of it is zigzaggy basically. Mine's quite large actually, but it will give me a much thinner pastry on it, which is good. So first of all, I'm going to measure out some plain flour. And it's always what we call a 2-to-1 ratio. So whichever amount of flour you use half the amount of fat. Now, I'm using just a sort of spread, to be honest, but ideally what would be better is if you used a butter, or even a lard would be great. But I'm just trying to kind of go with what I've got in. I don't have butter at the moment, so I'm just going to use a sort of cooking margarine that I have in, which is also really good because it is actually lower in what we call saturated fat. Saturated fat meaning that it comes from an animal, and that's not as good as an unsaturated fat, which is what I've got in here. So I'm going to cut the fat in using a knife, first of all. This cutting in allows me to, when I get on to the next stage, to do it much more efficiently. So the next part is, I need to make sure you get nice clean hands for this, it's called rubbing in. And I lift the mixture up, push the fat through the flour until it looks like breadcrumbs. Now, sometimes the fat melts. If your hands are very warm, the fat begins to melt and the flour will start to clump together, forming a dough before you want it to. If this happens, add more flour and rub it through the fat until it looks like breadcrumbs. Sometimes people say it looks like sand. It's very important that it doesn't clump together before you've added the water. The reason why it's called short crust pastry is because it has short gluten strands that are formed. Unlike when we made pizza and we wanted long strands of gluten to make it elastic, the crisp, crunchy, crumbly texture comes from the shorter gluten strands. However, I need to add water for the gluten to be formed. Otherwise, I have no gluten at all and it will just tear or break up as I try and roll it. So I'm going to add some water, about 3 or 4 tablespoons of nice cold water, again, so it doesn't melt the fat, and form this now into a dough. So it just looks currently like this. So I've now added some of the water and it's getting sticky and it's starting to clump together. So this is about the stage that I want. I would rather it be too sticky than too dry. If it's too dry, it will just crumble apart. So it's better if it's a little bit wet, so that it sticks together and that the gluten is formed from that water. Now, believe it or not, this is actually more like a GCSE product that we make. It's quite a complex product. So if you manage to make your own pastry, then well done, you're doing really well. Now we're gently kneading. Pastry is not like pizza dough because it doesn't have the gluten formation. It will become overworked if we move it around too much. So you're wanting to knead it so it becomes soft and so the fat moves through the pastry, but you don't actually want to over knead it or it will become really tough and you won't be able to roll it out at all. Once you've kneaded it, I would normally pop it in the fridge. I popped this one in earlier on back into the fridge once I'd made it. I made a small amount and you'll see that there's a difference between the two of them. I rolled it up into cling film and this one looks slightly different in colour to that one, as you can see. It's allowed to rest now and it's firmer. I've reformed the butter in it. So the butter's not soft like it is here. It's kind of firmed up and that's much easier actually to roll out and use for pastry. So using a rolling pin, I'm going to roll this out. You'll notice that I'm turning and shaping it so it's in a nice sort of circular shape because that's the shape of my tin here. And I'm going to roll it out and turn it as a roll in this method. Okay, so I've started to roll mine out. As you can see, I'm just turning it every so often, adding flour every so often so it doesn't stick to the table or to my rolling pin. If you don't have a rolling pin, you do what everybody else does and you find a glass bottle or something. I'm sure you've got lots of glass bottles about your house at the moment like I do. That's empty preferably, not filled still with wine. And you use that to roll it out. Once you've rolled it out and got kind of a nice thin layer, then you want to sort of check that it's going to fill into your actual tray here. The cheats method that you can do is you can use the excess, like I've got excess ball here from earlier on that I had in the fridge, and you can sort of patchwork it up if you need to. Pop the rolling pin down, lift the pastry up onto the rolling pin, place the tin down, and then lift the pastry up and roll it back onto the tray. Now you can manoeuvre your pastry. Now my pastry is very soft obviously because I've not refrigerated this. For some of you, you might in your recipe might mention something called baking blind. Baking blind is a very common way of making sure that your pastry is cooked without a filling in it. If you have to bake it blind, you will need to get something like pasta or rice, preferably some greaseproof paper, put the rice or the dry pasta on top to keep the pastry down so it doesn't make the pastry rise up and have big sort of bubbles in amongst it. You can trim around the edge, and as I say, if you need to, you can use the excess to build up. Making small individual ones is at GCSE considered to be even more complex. So if you wanted to, you could make small individual tarts. So I'm just finishing off my edge here. Okay, so that's my pastry tart, and now I'm going to start a filling for it. As I said, sweet or savoury. I'm going to use a tomato sauce I've actually made at home, and all I do, I make all my own tomato sauces, is I get a pile of tomatoes, big packs of tomatoes, roast them in the oven, and I add fresh oregano, basil, and I add garlic, sometimes onions, and I roast them. But one of my favourite ingredients is this thing here. It's called pomegranate molasses, and it's essentially like a sugar syrup. You could just use a maple syrup on top instead if you didn't have this. It gives it a nice sweetness, or even just adding some brown sugar to it. But I really like this. It really enhances the flavour and brings out that tomato flavour. Once I've roasted the tomatoes in the oven, I just get a stick blender and I blend them all up. Sometimes I add tomato puree just to thicken it a little bit, but I get the most delicious, really nutritious tomato sauce, and I can put it through pasta, I can use it for something like this. I even chuck it into my bolognese when I'm making it. but the vitamin content in it is so much higher than using chopped tomatoes, but obviously it is more expensive. So I'm going to now prepare my filling. I'm just going to clear this away and get the stuff for my filling. Okay, on to veg prep now. This is very important because again, this is another really high level skill. I didn't actually use a green pepper. I've already roasted my vegetables. I used red and yellow peppers because they're much sweeter, onions and some butternut squash. And I roasted them in the oven for about 45 minutes to an hour. Again, I put garlic and I put some of the pomegranate molasses and I roasted it in there until they went really soft and sweet. To prepare peppers, you need to, well, this is how I do it, but there's no right or wrong way. Pop the knife through and twist the pepper. This is how I like to do it anyway. And you can normally twist that top off and either the seeds will come with it or not. The cut in half, and then you can remove the white pith inside. Courgettes would also be really good. So now we are going to use our claw and our bridge to cut the vegetables into a sort of julienne cut. Notice how I'm rolling the knife back and forwards on the chopping board. I'm not lifting the knife up and down. Lifting the knife up and down gives me greater chances of obviously cutting myself. I can then just roast them like this, or I could obviously then cut them into smaller pieces. I have my tomato sauce here, which I made, which I told you about, with all the fresh tomatoes roasted in the oven. I did add tomato puree to thicken it because I was slightly concerned about it being too watery. I'm going to spread this now onto the base of my pastry case. And I'm going to put a layer of this, almost like making a pizza kind of, but with pastry. And I'm going to place it on. Now, I'm not baking blind. I'm slightly concerned that it might not work, but I don't think it will be necessary. I haven't got enough sort of wet ingredients that I think it will cause the pastry not to cook. So I'm going to run with my just baking the whole thing. When you're doing sweet products, obviously, that require you to put a filling in, you often should bake that blind by covering it. Once you've then got the filling in it, I'm then putting my roasted vegetables onto there, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. I've placed all the roasted vegetables now onto the tart, and what I also did was I cut some strips of pepper earlier and placed them along the top as well. I'm now going to add some goat's cheese to it, just because it's got quite a sort of bitter flavour, really rich, though, that would work very well with the vegetables. Remember, this isn't about you guys just learning how to cook, it's about you having confidence. The hospitality industry is a huge industry, and for many of you, you may end up working in that industry. And certainly being able to prepare food is such a skill, but it's confidence building, and it's the ability to be able to actually use fresh ingredients to make something that's not just a processed ready meal. So whatever you make, I don't mind if it's even using fruit. I would just like you to be using something that's really colourful, that's really nutritious, full of vitamins, because especially with us, maybe not getting out as much during lockdown, it's really important that we keep up our nutritional content, and certainly using as many fresh vegetables. If you can get a hold of some, that's terrific. If you can't get a hold of fresh, frozen is always a really good option. A lot of the time it can even have more nutritional content the way that they freeze it the moment that it's picked, so it stops losing nutritional value. But nowadays, whatever's in season is always going to be the right thing to choose. So something that's in season will always be cheaper, will always taste better, because there's lots and lots of it. So I'm going to add my goat's cheese on, and then I'm going to pop it into the oven, and then I'll hopefully be able to show you what it looks like at the end. So the challenge is to cook something colourful using vegetables, and let's see what you can get out of it. So that's mine at the moment, and I'm just going to get the goat's cheese on, and then I'm going to bake it in the oven and let you see it in a moment. Okay, so it's been baking in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes, looking for the crust to dextrinise. As you guys know, that means for it to go golden brown. I can check that it's ready because it should start coming away from the edges. That means the moisture is evaporating, and the goat's cheese on top starting to go slightly caramelised as well. Good luck with your next challenge. Remember, lots and lots of colourful vegetables, and send me your photographs so I can have a look and see how well you're getting on with it. Good luck.